Hi, everyone, and welcome to Be Alpha Live. I'm Christopher Robinson, editor of alphauniverse.com and host of the Alpha Universe podcast. And I'm here today with Kristin Atwood, Alpha Female Plus winner and, how's one saying, YouTube filmmaker extraordinaire. Kristin, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. It's exciting.
Kristin won a grant for making a series of films around seasonality called Flight of the Bumblebees, seasonality in food called Flight of the Bumblebees. And we're going to go ahead and roll the first one of those episodes right now.
Wildflowers. They bloom and grow in their own time, surrounded by weeds and bugs and other things that gardeners don't seem to like. Despite what might be less than ideal growing conditions, they bloom all the same, and I think there's something kind of wonderful about that. Today, I'm making baked meringues inspired by wildflowers. One thing I've learned the hard way over the last year and a half is that sometimes in life things are out of your control, and the more you try to grab hold of the reins, the further away it all seems to get. The only thing that has ever worked for me in these times has been to loosen my grip, to let go and let things grow and take shape in their own time. I don't have the answers, and the one thing I know for sure is how much there is to know out there in the big wide world, and how little of it I ever will. But I can tell you what I think. I think that maybe it's about embracing the wildness of life, and all that comes with it, the ups and downs and everything in between. Let spring be spring. Let summer be summer, and when you can, let it be.
And we're back live. That was Kristin Atwood's film from Flight of the Bumblebees, one of the films she made from her Alpha Female Plus grant. And Kristin, you actually made a behind the scenes video for that as well. And we have that on hand. We're going to go ahead and give that a play. And then we're going to come back and be taking questions live.
Perfect.
Let's cue that up.
Hi everybody, my name is Kristin Atwood. I am the second Sony Alpha Female Plus grant winner for this year, and the project that I did is called Flight of the Bumblebee, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that today. And then I'm also going to do a little bit of the behind the scenes and show you how I film, kind of what kit I use, and bring you through kind of the whole process of how I create a video and that sort of thing. The inspiration for things that I'm working on can kind of come from anywhere, but a lot of the time for me, just because food especially is so tied to the natural world, my inspiration usually comes from that. So what's in season or what's going on outside, that sort of thing. And I did find that this year, especially I think being home with the pandemic, I kind of got to see the seasons change a little bit more clearly because I wasn't inside all the time working. And I just felt really kind of inspired by the bumblebees in my back garden. So that was kind of the background, I guess, idea moment behind the series. And usually what will happen from there is I will start to think, okay, so bumblebees, what are some ideas that come to mind? All right, so florals, honey, berries, sweetness, and then I just let everything kind of snowball from there. Even if I have a starting point for a series or a recipe idea or a video concept, and it feels maybe somewhat far away from what I had started off with, it doesn't always have to be directly related. I think most of the time viewers can kind of create that bridge themselves and understand like how one thing is affected by the other. There's actually a really good Stanley Kubrick quote where he was saying if you want to communicate an idea or a feeling or a concept, the least effective way is directly. And I totally agree with that. So while I do a lot of food media and cooking videos, that's not always 100% what is going on. There's sometimes like an underlayer of what I'm talking about or what I'm trying to express, and I don't always have to say that directly. One of the big drivers behind creating this series as well was just I really wanted to create something that was relaxing and a little bit of an escape for people who are watching, just because this last 18 months has been very stressful and super unpredictable, and scrolling through the news on your phone is so kind of chaotic and it can get to be a lot. And I think just for me personally, so I am neurodivergent, I have ADHD, and it's something that I have struggled with since I was very young. I was diagnosed when I was 6, and it's something that I've kind of worked to get better at dealing with and working with, just not just like in my work, but just in my everyday life. And one of the ways that I've found that really helps me to kind of like get my thoughts in order has been to create. And so whether that's cooking or filmmaking, I kind of enter into this really zen-like state, and I can just focus on what's in front of me. And so what I wanted was to translate that into film so that other people could experience that. And that's not just for this series, that's been kind of like a big thing in my work for a really long time. It's like, how do I take this experience that has become almost meditative for me and give that to other people? Going off of that topic and kind of sticking with the idea of inspiration, one thing that has been very important for me and is super important in incorporating into my work is that I don't allow myself to be confined to the kind of typical look or style or feel of my genre. I think one of the greatest examples of somebody who does this and has done this really well is David Gelb from Chef's Table on Netflix. He changed the genre of cooking TV, I think, and that show for sure has really inspired a lot of my work. And one thing that I think is really fantastic about that show in particular is that there are a ton of other filmmakers, YouTubers, creators who I know who aren't involved in cooking at all, and they watch Chef's Table and they take some of that and add it into what they're creating, which I think is really great because the cooking genre of television or cooking media or culinary media is now kind of bleeding into other types of media, which is awesome. But for me, there's no limit on where I can find inspiration from, and I think that this is something that I really encourage other people to do, is to look at completely different genres, completely different art forms, and see how can I add this into what I'm doing or what I'm creating. I guess as an example for me, if you've ever seen Mad Men, which is probably my favorite show of all time, there's this scene in it where Don Draper is walking away from his wife Megan, and they're on a television set, and the camera pulls away as he's walking, and it's so beautiful. And then Nancy Sinatra's "You Only Live Twice" is like swelling in the background, and it's one of the most beautiful scenes you'll ever see in your life. And so just looking at what that scene looks like and saying, okay, like I love that idea of that like pull away and the dramatic music swelling in the background, and how can I take that look and translate that into what I'm doing? And obviously I'm never going to do it as good as that, but you know, you get the same feel. Another example is The Mandalorian, believe it or not. And that was kind of where I got the idea to use an LED screen as a background. So you can actually check it out online. There's a couple of videos about how they use LED panels, and they're massive LED, whole entire sets and roofs made of LED lighting panels. I don't know, it was just exciting. If you see somebody doing something really new and cool in filmmaking, you're like, wow, I want to try that. Yeah, but where am I going to get an LED set from? Well, how can I incorporate that into what I'm doing? And obviously LED sets are mega expensive, and even like a large LED background, just like a wall-sized panel would be way out of my budget. But what isn't outside of my budget is just my television, because that is an LED panel if you want it to be. So I just put my TV on a rolling rack, like for a projector, and I will roll it behind if I'm filming using an LED background. Sorry that the lighting is so bad. It is what it is. I usually light from that side, so we're just gonna have to deal with this for now. But this is the set that I created for the series. It is not very big. It looks big because I'm filming this on my wide-angle lens, but it's essentially the size of this fake green grass carpet. It's like 8 by 8 feet or something. It's not huge. And then I have a velvet green curtain, some fake plants, because I can hardly keep myself alive. I really just wanted to kind of create my own little corner where the series could live, I guess. And since I wanted the series to be immersive, I wanted it to feel like you were actually in this little place with me. So I did want it to be an escape and have a super distinct feel to it. So a lot of the colors that I used were just plain whites, green, like a darker green, and then yellow with pink accents. And those same colors I actually used for the text at the beginning of the episode. So these are all things that I like to plan out ahead of time and kind of like tie in, even if it's in a small way, just so that a series kind of like has like an overall look or feel to it. When viewers watch, even if they don't think about it consciously, it's something that is like part of the experience, and they do sort of feel that calmness instead of like chaotic all over the place creative decisions. Okay, so let's talk lighting. Lighting is a super important part of my videos, and it is something that actually took me a really long time to figure out how to do properly and do in a way that I really like. And the best way that I have found, and the way that works for me, is just with diffused natural light. It looks the best with food. It is what it is. So not to say that I'm like perfect at lighting it on, very much not. So I don't actually normally film in this room. I usually have a studio space, but was told a week after I found out about the grant that I wasn't going to be able to use the space for 3 weeks during the time when I had to film. So I am now in my dining room actually. So these are the front windows of my dining room, and they just have sheer curtains, but in my other studio, I just have my table next to a window, and I like bought a cheap sheer curtain and put that up, and it works just the same. It just gives you natural, really beautiful white diffused light. So that's what I use. So now I'm just going to walk you through some of the actual prep when it comes to the recipes themselves. So a few weeks usually before I start a series, what I do is I sketch out my ideas, and they don't always turn out the way that I plan them, but I like to just kind of have a really rough idea. I'm not good at sketching, okay? It's fine, it is what it is. But yeah, I like to have a really good kind of clear idea of what in my head I am imagining something to look like. And then what I will do is I will go back in and label each element. So like this is the meringue, or this is going to be flavored with lavender. And then from there I will write out a recipe and go to the store, make sure to get all my ingredients. I'll order online anything that takes a little bit longer to get here or like isn't readily available in stores. On the actual day of shooting, what I like to do is I like to weigh out my ingredients ahead of time and just get them organized, make sure that, you know, my butter is softened and my eggs are out of the fridge and everything's sort of counted and weighed and ready to go so that I'm not running back and forth between different parts of my house or my studio or whatever it is. And I just want things to be like easily accessible so that I can really just focus on the filming. So the equipment that I used to film this series is a Sony a7 III, and then I used the 16 to 35 millimeter G Master lens. And then I also used a 50 millimeter f1.8, which is also a Sony lens. The 16 to 35 is great because, like I was showing you before, I am filming in quite a small space. So if I need to get a shot where, you know, it's an establishing shot of the set, or if I am trying to get a full-length shot of the table, the 16 to 35 millimeter lens is great, and the image is so clear. The 50 millimeter lens is great for shots where the subject is in focus and the background is really soft and blurred, and it just makes things look really romantic and light and airy, and I love using that lens. But I mean, both lenses were great for this project, and they really allowed me to have a lot of versatility in what I was shooting, so I'm really pleased with my setup. When it comes to actually filming itself, since I usually just shoot solo and I can't really move a camera if I'm also cooking, I have to do mostly static shots. But because of this, I want things to still look interesting, so essentially every time I crack an egg or move my hands or move a bowl, I change where the camera is. So the camera is constantly moving, so it does take me quite a long time to film because it's like every time I make a move, like I pour some sugar, I slice some butter up, I do anything at all, I move the camera and get a different angle or capture it a different way. I find that for food specifically, backlighting actually looks really nice. It makes it look really like romantic, and I also like side lighting a lot, but if you have front on lighting, it just kind of washes it out. I really like the look of just contrast and shadows, and you can see the texture of the food better, so that's just a personal choice. After lighting, I think probably the most important thing for me as a creator is composition. I want all of my shots that are filmed to look like they could be photos. And that's just my own thing. Like, I think it's really easy to get kind of lazy and just think like, well, it's a 10-minute video. This doesn't really matter. This shot here where I'm pouring this into the bowl, like, it's okay. I can just rush past this. But for me, I like everything to look really clean and composed. Just if you're wondering how I get my dishes to spin, it's actually super easy. I just bought on Amazon a kind of little turntable thing. I think it was like 20 bucks, 40 bucks, something like that. And that's just what I place a dish on, and I make sure to kind of like get that out of the frame. Okay, so here is the setup for when I do the kind of beginning and ending scenes for some of the pieces, which is with the LED backdrop, which is literally just a TV. And then I use a projector, and what I do is I actually connect them both to my computer, which is playing the same image. And the way that I've set it up is that they're actually both playing the same thing, and all this does is kind of get the projector to throw the same quality of light onto the image. So I'm getting light from the backdrop, and I'm also getting light from the projector, and it's the same kind of color and tone, which is, yeah, really works out really well for food, especially because sometimes like with green screen and stuff, you get like really wonky colors. And yeah, so basically I will get the lighting onto the table, and you can do something like this in post, but it's a little bit more difficult, and I just like how it looks. Like it, you know, you can tell that you can tell once it's captured on film that it's, you know, you actually caught it while it was happening. I'm going to show you a couple more examples of just the LED backdrop and the projection mapping. You can get some really cool looks from using this technique, and it's not that complicated to set up. So yeah, these are a couple of examples. So I think that is mostly all that I have to say about kind of my process from start to finish of how I shoot a video or how I set up a web series. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're interested in seeing the whole flight of the Bumblebee series, you can check it out on the Alpha Universe website, or you can head over to the Chef Studio YouTube channel.
You're right. You should have gone on at the same time.
Hello and welcome back to Be Alpha Live. I'm Christopher Robinson and I'm here with Kristin Atwood. We've just seen one of her project videos for her Alpha Female Plus grant, as well as a really comprehensive behind the scenes video that she made. And Kristin, just thank you for being here today and talking through some of this with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a lot of people have kind of asked me before just on the channel and stuff to share how I film and how I do things. So this is a really good opportunity to kind of put something together and show people what happens behind the scenes. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you. And while you're here, of course, we are live and we'll be taking questions from the audience. Please submit your questions in the chat. We already have several questions, but don't be shy. Throw in there whatever you'd like to know. We'll get to as many questions as we can. Before we begin with some of the questions, I noticed that we got a lot of comments from people that just were really impressed with your visuals. And I know that that's one of the things that really excited the judges when you applied for the Alpha Female Plus grant was your visual sensibility, but also there was something about the way you describe your process as a filmmaker. You're making cooking videos, but you want to transport people kind of into another space with them. So I think one of the things that was really interesting is that notion of, yes, it's a cooking video, but if you're not cooking, you can still really enjoy this as a kind of a film, a meditative process. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, I mean, when I was younger, and I think kind of my first introduction to cooking media was I used to watch Food Network. And I think a lot of people did this where it's almost like you have no plans of ever making what it is that you're watching, but it's just really kind of comforting to have on in the background. And so I think I really wanted to have in a lot of my work, that's kind of the experience that I want to channel to people, is just like a relaxing, comforting atmosphere. And I do think that there is something kind of, I don't know, like calming about when somebody else cooks for you and you can kind of relax. So yeah, that's kind of where that whole concept, I guess, comes from.
As you were watching the behind the scenes video and you were showing some of your process there, we got a question about the external monitor that you use. What do you use when you're shooting?
It's like a I don't even know. I bought it on Amazon. It's like a Neewer. I might maybe saying it wrong. Neewer. Yeah. So I I like need to have an external monitor because again, like with the composition thing and the lighting, like I like to see how it's going to look on a screen. And the Sony A7 III, actually, the one that I was using, is fantastic for that, because even if you don't have a monitor that you can connect directly with like an HDMI cord to your camera, you can actually send it via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi onto like a tablet or an iPad or your phone. So that was really helpful. So yeah, a couple of days I actually just used my iPad as the external monitor.
When you say that you really feel like you need to have an external monitor, why is that such a need?
So there have been times I can get by with just using the monitor that comes on the camera, but I think for food especially, just like super tiny details will end up bothering me later on. And there's also been times where I've gone back and I'm like, oh, a hair, and you can't see it on a small monitor, but you cannot, like, I would never publish something with a hair in it because like that's gross. But yeah, just little tiny details you'll pick up better if you have an external monitor.
Your YouTube channel is called Chef Studio. Do I have that right?
Yes.
And how long have you had that YouTube channel going?
Well, it's kind of a bit of a weird one. So in Chef Studio for the last 2-3 years, I guess. It started in September 2019. Like that was kind of when I made the transition. But initially, it actually just started as a place where I was publishing videos, because how I got started in filmmaking and photography was I was doing client work for local restaurants and things like that. So I started publishing that sort of stuff onto my channel, which at the time was known as KAC Creative, which was the name of my company. And then I was like, well, I need to build my portfolio up a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll make a couple videos of my own and publish those as well. And maybe that'll help me like build my client base. And then what ended up happening was it just ended up growing a YouTube audience that I hadn't really expected. So yeah.
Okay.
So I guess sorry, that was like a really roundabout way of answering a question.
No,
I think
that's a
like
great answer.
for 4 or 5 years probably that I've been posting stuff on YouTube, but I think the past 2 years pretty much has been the like chef studio concept.
When did you sort of make it into that concept of where you're trying to make videos that are a little bit meditative? Has it always been that, or did that transition happen over time?
I think that transition definitely happened over time. I think when I first started, and I think a lot of other kind of artists can probably relate, I was trying to do what other people were doing, I guess, a lot more. Like there's a channel out there called Chef Steps, and I like loved their work. And so I was like, oh, like maybe I can do my own version of that. Or I was super influenced by Chef's Table and things like that. So I was, trying to see kind of like how my work could kind of fit into the world of culinary media. And so I think it just over time, you learn your own kind of look and feel for things, and it started to change into something that was really uniquely me. And then what's great about YouTube is that you're getting like an audience feedback loop, right? So people who are commenting and saying like, oh, this video really resonated with me, or this video was really relaxing and I actually really enjoyed this more than some of your others, or whatever it is. And it's always about just taking those sorts of things and then adding more of what people like into the stuff that I make in the future. So that I think that was kind of where it came from, is that I realized people really enjoyed those videos that were more calming and relaxing, and that was constantly in the comment section. So I was like, okay, that's kind of where I'm going to steer my work, because I guess this is what people enjoy and this is what I'm good at. So yeah.
I would say you certainly are amazing at it. And as I've said a couple of times, we are here live with Kristin Atwood. We're taking your questions live. Please feel free to throw some questions into the chat for Kristin. And we got a question from Jesse Nelson, specific question about using the Xperia 1 III to make videos. Would you use an Xperia 1 III to make some videos? And also, what is the best part for you about the A7S III?
What's an Xperia 1 III? I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's one of the Sony cell phones that some photographers and filmmakers use, or rather some filmmakers use as an external monitor. And I guess there was a question about whether you had considered using sort of a smartphone like that as an external monitor.
Yeah, you totally could. That's what's great about these cameras, is that it'll likely work a lot better if it's a Sony native product as well. So yeah, definitely. It's just as an example, like the first video that's on my YouTube channel is actually shot with a phone, like not even connected to a camera, just the phone. So I only shot with like one camera with a single lens for like an extended period of time. And it's always just about using what you have. So if that's what you have, and they're fantastic quality screens. And so, I mean, yeah, that would totally work as an external monitor, 100%.
Looking back at some of your process, and you went through how you shoot and everything so much in that video. When it comes to the editing, how long does it take you typically to edit one of your films?
It depends if I'm doing a lot of like, I guess like overlays or like color grading and things like that. I try not to color grade too much, but I can usually get an edit done in a day, but it depends. Sometimes they'll drag on for like weeks if I can't get it to look exactly how I want it to look.
What software do you like to use for your edits?
I kind of am a bit weird because I will switch back and forth. So I'll use Premiere Pro sometimes, but most of the time I use Final Cut Pro 10.
Have you always used Premiere Pro, or did you switch around to different software packages?
Well, I started with Premiere actually, and then I've like switched more over to Final Cut Pro.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got that backwards.
Oh yeah, sorry. No. Yeah, but I think it's good to be able to use both, and it just depends on if you're editing at home. It's literally whatever you feel most comfortable using. So
We're here live with Kristin Atwood. Please feel free to send us some questions in the chat. Kristin is an Alpha Female Plus grant winner. She won a grant to make her series Flight of the Bumblebees, which was built around cooking and seasonality. And she made a great behind the scenes video for us as well. And Kristin, I'm just kind of curious about, you talk about changing camera position all the time while you're shooting. Is that something you've always done, or was that something that kind of evolved as you started making films more?
I think, I'm trying to think back. I think it's something that I've always done. It's maybe just that initially I didn't realize why I was doing it. I just kind of knew that I liked the way that the finished product looked. But I guess it just kind of came out of necessity because I can't move the camera if I'm filming myself and I'm just filming alone. So if there are a few videos on my channel where I actually go get out of the studio and go into the world, and I'll bring a stabilizer with me and stuff like that, and I will film stuff where the camera is actually moving. But most of the time it's just switching shots. But yeah, I don't know. I think, yeah, it mostly just came out of necessity, and I ended up liking how it looks. So now I do it more purposefully, I guess.
Well, you talked a little bit about the fact that you like to focus on composition quite a lot, and and having that, every frame in the video could stand alone as a as a still photo in some ways. Is that something that you have always done, or was that something that is part of the meditative series? And I'm asking that because when you're making cooking videos, a lot of times that composition can be a little bit secondary because you want to show some sort of a technique or something else going on. And to really focus and try and take that time to really frame up every shot, especially when you're moving, like you said, kind of every shot is a big thing.
Yeah, so I think initially, I guess my older videos, this definitely isn't a thing. My composition is just not great in most of them. And it definitely just comes with practice and learning and that sort of thing, and kind of learning what it is that I like as far as stylistically. But yeah, it's a bit challenging, but also I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and I have a very specific way that I like things to look. So it just kind of is I don't know, has become necessary for me now. I have to make each shot look as beautiful as possible or whatever. But yeah, I think you're totally right with content. That sort of thing can oftentimes just get pushed to the background. And even in a lot of network cooking shows, right? If you think about how those are filmed, they're usually style is kind of second. They're mostly just okay, we have 5 giant lighting panels, and we just want to get, the celebrity chef is super everything is in focus in the whole set, and it's all, I don't know, got its own look, but I don't know, I wanted to do stuff that looks a little bit more cinematic, I guess.
Sure. David asks if you have a favorite cookie recipe.
Ooh, if I have a favorite pea, I don't know. I feel ginger molasses cookies. I have a good story, actually. The Samuel L. Jackson loves these ginger molasses cookies, and you can get the recipe. My friend Sophia Hembeck, she interviewed me for her newsletter called The Mewsletter, and you can look that up and find the recipe. But this was my first kitchen job, actually. I worked at this organic bakery here just outside of Toronto, and we would wholesale into some of the fancy grocery stores in downtown Toronto. And we got this call one day from somebody at a movie production company, and they were like, "We need a dozen for Samuel L. Jackson now," because I guess they had sold out at the Whole Foods or whatever. So we ended up packaging up a bunch of these ginger cookies for Samuel L. Jackson, supposedly. So that's the story behind that. So that's my favorite cookie recipe.
That's a great story and a great reason why that would become a favorite cookie recipe.
Yeah, they are delicious. Oh, yeah, sorry, gone.
We got a question about sort of your background as a filmmaker. Would you consider yourself self-taught?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I didn't go to school for filmmaking or anything, but we live in an amazing age where you can learn literally whatever you want online. And there's a ton of amazing YouTube filmmakers who I learned from. So, yeah.
For people watching this who maybe are aspiring YouTube filmmakers, also being self-taught, do you have a single piece of advice that you might give them to help get them on their way?
That's a good question. I think honestly, it's just like you have to just start somewhere. Even if, and I had a hard time with this personally when I first started, because I was like, man, my work does not look like Peter McKinnon's, or, you know, my work doesn't look like Casey Neistat's. Like, it's not as cinematic, it's not as beautiful. I don't have access to that equipment to make things look like that. But you just have to start, and you just have to learn how to, you know, master your camera. Because I had like a fairly inexpensive camera, and again, like I was saying before, I was shooting with only one lens before, and so it's like if you can really master your camera, you will eventually learn how to make things look really beautiful. And then when you are able to upgrade eventually, like I don't know, your filmmaking will get so much better. But I don't know, it's just about starting wherever you are, and it's the practice that is gonna make perfect. And people just grow as their channels grow, or as their audience grows as well. So
Absolutely. I think for any aspiring filmmaker, you know, if you've really never done it before and you're looking at work like yours, for instance, it you know, and you start to try and make it, it can feel really daunting because it's there's a bit of a learning curve there. But you know, the longest journey, it starts with the first step.
Yeah, exactly. And like, don't be afraid for your stuff to not look very good at first. That's fine. Like I watch some of my old videos back, and I think like, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? But that's totally fine. Like, I don't know a single creative person or artist or filmmaker who hasn't had that experience. Nobody, you know, like Quentin Tarantino was not always Quentin Tarantino. You know, he started working in a movie store. So it's just learning and taking the time to practice. And that's kind of where you're going to get better. So you have to just be okay with not being perfect. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I really found that resonated with me when I was watching your behind the scenes video was talking about sort of the simplicity of your lighting setup. You know, that you really studied light, you know, for a long time, and you were working on it for a bit, and you sort of settled on a very simple, elegant, but super great solution.
Yeah, I mean, I like natural light the best for filming food. I don't know. I've tried. Maybe I'm just not good at fake lighting. Maybe that's what it is. I'm just bad at it. But I like natural light for me always looks the best, and it's what I'm able to capture. I don't know, most easily. And so yeah, for a time I was living in Scotland, and it was great actually because it's always cloudy there. So it just turns the sky into a giant softbox, like constantly. So I was like, wow, all my work is so beautifully lit. This is fantastic. So that's advantageous if you live somewhere that's cloudy. But if not, like I was showing people just if you have a sheer curtain, or if you can buy diffusers and things like that, and then you can angle the light a little bit better, or you can use reflectors and things like that. But most of it you can just do with a window.
I think that's such a great point. And talking about like the cloudy sky, you know, being sort of God's softbox, it works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We got a bunch of questions sort of related to your application to the Alpha Female Plus program. And first, how did you hear about the Alpha Female Plus grant program?
So I actually got an ad on social media when I saw it, and I was like, wow, this kind of seems interesting. And then I looked into it a little bit, And I was kind of humming and hawing about whether I would apply, because I felt like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if I'm good enough, and all these sorts of like thoughts that go through most people's heads. Like, you're not sure and you don't know what the competition's going to look like, or if you're ever going to be able to measure up and stuff like that. But I just decided to, I don't know, go for it, put together the best reel that I could, put together like cohesive project, and submit. And so, yeah, it turned out.
Can you sort of relate how you described your project in your essay when you applied?
Sure. So essentially what I wanted to do was, well, with a lot of the series that I've been posting on my channel recently, they're inspired by something. So that can be like anything, right? Nature, nature, like seasonality, that sort of thing. And I do think it was mostly because of the pandemic, being at home so much. We really got to see the seasons change, I think, a lot better. And especially for me, coming from, well, a few years ago when I was working as a chef full time, and like sometimes I just didn't see daylight for like months. Just, yeah, being able to be outside more and like seeing the change every day was really kind of inspired to make a series about spring and summer and bumblebees. And I just think that they're kind of like the coolest little insects, and they're the only insect that makes food. I don't know if you know that. That's a cool fact. I don't know. They're fascinating. So that was the inspiration behind it. And kind of like what I was saying in the behind the scenes video, is that not every video in the 5-part series is directly related to bumblebees, but you can understand, like people can make the connection, like, okay, it's like flowers or blossoms or honey or whatever it is. The one video called The Hexagon is like based on how honeybees make their honeycombs out of hexagonal shapes. And that sort of thing. So sorry about the grant. So I actually, my like essay part, I really just tried to focus on my why a lot more. So I did a bit of an explanation about what the series was going to be, and then I just focused on the why, which was because like this has been an extremely stressful 18 months, almost 2 years for everybody, and I wanted to create something that was relaxing and something that would be able to share that kind of like Zen meditative process with the people who are watching, and so people could have that like moment of escape. And yeah.
I think for the judges, sort of looking at your essay, looking at your work, they really got a sense of what you're going to create. You wrote it up very clearly, and then also they got a sense of how it would be different from sort of everything else in that particular genre. Your filmmaking is so super unique, I think, in the cooking genre, and really, painting that picture for the judges, letting them see it, I think really resonated and led to you getting the grant.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I think one of the big parts of the application is you have to, if you're submitting as a filmmaker, you have to submit a reel, or if you're a photographer, you have to submit like examples of your work. And so I think that that's really where you can make your application shine. And a really good tip, if you're doing any type of reel, or even if you're submitting just a bunch of your photography, is try and tell some type of story, or like have a bit of a narrative behind it, where people who are looking at it can like understand what you're trying to say. But then also make sure that it's like varied, and you have a lot of different examples of the stuff that you do, so that judges can really see what it is that the work that you produce. So yeah.
Regarding sort of the nuts and bolts of your filmmaking technique and your camera work, what are your go-to settings to create that really cinematic look that you make?
So I usually shoot. So the Sony A7 III. Somebody's car alarm's going off outside. The Sony camera, it has the capability of doing 30 frames per second at 4K, which is awesome. And that sort of thing is really good for reality television, and it like is ridiculously high quality. And I actually filmed a little bit because I hadn't had those capabilities before, and I was like, ooh, I want to see. But I decided to settle back on doing 24 frames per second. And that is just because if you go to the cinema, what you're watching is 24 frames per second most of the time, unless they do something stylistic and they like lower it or whatever. And that kind of gives you that look. So that's why I like to shoot in 24 frames per second. But again, just totally personal choice. That is just like a completely stylistic thing. And then there's a couple of other things. Like sometimes I'll shoot with like a higher shutter speed because it gives you like more like detail in a way, or just looks really interesting and kind of jittery. And while some people don't like how that looks, with certain scenes I do, because you can get like a really clear like little granules of sugar pouring into a bowl, or like splashes and things like that, and they look really like sharp. So those are just kind of weird stylistic things that I like to do every once in a while. But yeah.
For your projection look that you create, can you remind us what projector it is that you use for that?
I don't even know off the top of my head. It is not a crazy expensive projector. I think it was like $300 on Amazon, and I'm sorry that I don't know the brand. But yeah, I have no idea.
Well, I guess that speaks to the fact that it's the craftsman, not necessarily the tool, right?
No, there's a lot better projectors out there. There's some like super amazing projectors, and you can get really, really cool effects with those, but those are a little outside my budget right now, but one day, maybe.
So having shot this whole project with Sony, what are the things that you've liked about the Sony versus other systems that you may have used in the past?
Ooh, there's like a lot. I think, I mean, some things initially that I thought were really interesting was that the camera system, you can update it like online, which is so cool. To me, because I hadn't been able to do that before, like you can plug your camera in and like update your lenses and update your camera. I was like, what? This is amazing. Like if you compare that to like there's a certain kind of romance and everything to like film cameras and things like that. But I mean, you can plug your camera in and update it. That's insane. And then I guess just for shooting, again, I really, really loved that I was able to tether super easy on whatever it was that I had. So if that's on my computer or my external monitor or my iPad or whatever it is, they make that super easy. And there's just like a ton of options for customization as well. So that's another thing that's fantastic about the Sony cameras, is like there are loads and loads of things that you can make your own. So yeah, just from like a filmmaker's perspective, like that means that I can get exactly the look that I want. I can adjust the color and the temperature and the shutter speed and everything, like to make it exactly how I want. So yeah, that's one thing that I really liked about it, is that it's super customizable.
You can see more of Kristin's winning project at alphauniverse.com. See all the videos there, as well as on her channel, Chef Studio on YouTube. Please subscribe to Kristin's channel. Kristin, it's really been a pleasure having you here today on Be Alpha Live. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Chris. I appreciate it.